Okay, think about the absolute pinnacle of success in the music industry. The summit, the gold medal. We're talking, of course, about the #1 spot on the Billboard charts. I mean, we just naturally assume that the most iconic, culture-shifting, stadium-shaking anthems of all time just crushed the competition, right? They had to take home the gold. Well, today in this explainer, we're unpacking the really surprising and honestly fascinating truth about chart-topping success. Seriously, prepare to have your musical assumptions completely flipped upside down.
So, take a second. What do Lady Gaga's Bad Romance, Psy's absolute global phenomenon Gangnam Style, and Queen's operatic masterpiece Bohemian Rhapsody all have in common? Just try to guess the connection between these seemingly random but massively iconic tracks. I mean, do they all win Grammys? Are they the most streamed songs of their decades? Think back to how completely unavoidable these songs were when they dropped. You literally couldn't go to a grocery store, a wedding, or turn on the radio without hearing them.
Okay, let's dive into this because the answer is absolutely mind-blowing. Ready? None of them ever hit #1 in the US. No way, right? But it's true. And that brings us to our core thesis today. Massive cultural impact does not always equal chart position. Being permanently etched into the history books doesn't mean you actually won the sprint that specific week or that specific month. In fact, as you'll see, the songs that end up defining a whole generation were actually often runners-up.
Part 1. The #2 Club.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the history of pop music is just littered with these absolute travesties. We're talking about enduring anthems getting completely robbed at the top spot, stalling out at #2 while something else took the gold. Take Missy Elliott's Work It. Massive track in 2002, right? But it was stuck at #2 for a staggering 10 weeks. What blocked it? Eminem's Grammy and Oscar-winning juggernaut Lose Yourself. Basically, two absolute masterpieces colliding, and Missy had to settle for silver. But then, on the flip side, let's go back to 1963. The Ronettes released Be My Baby, a gorgeous, heavily imitated song that influenced practically everyone. But it also stalled at #2. Why? Because it got blocked by a completely forgettable novelty track called Sugar Shack by Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs. So, sometimes you get beaten by a titan like Eminem, and sometimes you get beaten by a song history has completely, totally forgotten.
Part 2. Queen's Costly Gamble.
Now let's look at one of the most famous runner-up hits in history, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. Behind this iconic song was an incredibly high-stakes do-or-die situation. Today, we look at Queen as literal rock royalty, but in 1975, the reality behind the scenes was so much darker. 60 pounds. That's it. They were locked into this terrible management contract, making a mere 60 pounds a week from Trident Studios. Despite their previous success with the album Sheer Heart Attack and having a #2 hit in the UK with Killer Queen, they were completely broke. To put that into perspective for you, Freddie Mercury was living in a flat with rising damp, and Brian May was stuck in a tiny bedsit. John Deacon couldn't even get a cash advance to put a deposit on a house. The band was understandably furious. So furious, actually, that they broke their contract, which left them massively in debt.
Which leads us directly to this quote from guitarist Brian May. So we were making this album knowing it was live or die. Just let that sink in. If their new album, A Night at the Opera, wasn't a massive smash success, the band was completely ruined. They had to pay over £200,000 just to buy themselves out of their old contract. Plus, they had to cancel a really lucrative American tour. The pressure was just unimaginable. They weren't just writing an album, they were literally fighting for their survival.
So what do you do with your backs completely against the wall? Well, if you're Queen, you decide to spend £40,000 to make the record, which, at the time of its release, made A Night at the Opera reportedly the most expensive album ever recorded. The sheer irony and the massive risk here is just incredible. I mean, they are dead broke, heavily in debt, and their grand solution is to lock themselves in the studio for 4 months and spend an absolute fortune crafting this wildly complex, multi-layered masterpiece.
Part 3. Building Bohemian Rhapsody.
Now, what's really interesting here is looking at exactly how Queen spent that massive budget to create their unique sound. They definitely weren't just laying down standard rock tracks. They were pulling from everywhere: progressive rock, music hall, sea shanties, heavy metal, avant-pop, you name it. They went to some bizarre, highly innovative lengths. Like for Bohemian Rhapsody, they used a brand new 24-track tape recorder to create those intense, operatic vocal harmonies, layering their voices over and over and over again. On the track The Prophet Song, they used wild delay effects, and Brian May played a literal toy koto. For the space exploration folk song 39, John Deacon learned to play a double bass in a matter of days, basically just as a joke. And then on Seaside Rendezvous, Freddie Mercury and Roger Taylor literally performed a tap dance segment by drumming on the studio mixing desk with thimbles on their fingers. I mean, they threw absolutely everything at this album.
So what was the result of all that money, stress, and, thimble tapping? Well, when Bohemian Rhapsody was finally released in the US in 1975, this incredibly expensive, melodramatic masterpiece peaked at number 9. But wait, here is the ultimate irony. Almost 2 decades later, in 1992, the movie Wayne's World propelled the song right back up the charts. It surged all the way to number 2. And what kept this epic, legendary, operatic rock ballad from finally hitting number 1? A teenage rap duo named Criss Cross with their song Jump. Yep, once again, one of the greatest songs ever written was blocked from the very top spot.
Part 4, 1984, Pop's Blockbuster Year.
Now, Queen's story isn't the only way a song gets blocked. Sometimes the charts are just overwhelmingly crowded. Seriously, if you released a song in 1984, you were basically walking into a buzzsaw of musical titans. Just look at this timeline. In July, Prince unleashes Purple Rain, an album and a movie that completely dominated the culture, with When Doves Cry sitting at number 1 for 5 whole weeks. Then, in September, the very first MTV Video Music Awards happen, featuring Madonna rolling around in a wedding dress to Like a Virgin. By December, the supergroup Band Aid releases Do They Know It's Christmas, raising millions for famine relief. The sheer density of paradigm-shifting musical moments happening back-to-back in a single 12-month span is just staggering.
So the crucial point here is just how cutthroat the charts were that year. Look at this lineup. You've got Stevie Wonder, George Michael, Prince, Band Aid, and Tina Turner all dropping their biggest hits worldwide. Oh, and Bruce Springsteen was also releasing Born in the USA. Van Halen dropped Jump, and Wham had Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. If you were a musician in 1984, the ceiling was impossibly high. You could literally release the greatest song of your entire career, an absolute classic, and still stall out at number 2 or 3 simply because Prince or Stevie Wonder happened to release a song on the exact same week.
Which brings us to our final and frankly provocative question. Does chart position actually matter for a song's legacy? I mean, we've seen that Queen poured their life savings and their sanity into Bohemian Rhapsody, only for it to peak at number 9 and then years later at number 2. We've seen massive talents like Missy Elliott and the Ronettes get trapped in the number 2 club, and we've seen how insanely crowded a year like 1984 can make the summit. But think about it today. Nobody really remembers that Jimmy Gilmer's Sugar Shack beat the Ronettes, or that Criss Cross held off Freddie Mercury. Cultural impact, it turns out, vastly outlives a temporary number 1 spot. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep listening to great music, and I'll see you next time.